Well, here we are in Philadelphia this morning, and it is with great pleasure and an honor that I am talking to Joe Silvestri this morning. And Joe is 100% Marine.
That's right.
And he was born again hard when he was at the young age of what?
18.
So 18 years old. And Joe, what we're doing is we're doing veteran interviews, okay, it's an oral history project so that our story, you know, the Vietnam veteran never has really, even Ken Burns's documentaries and stuff really doesn't touch the personal experiences of the guys that were over there.
Yes.
So I'm just going to start this interview real easy, and I'd like to know, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Sicily, a small town in the province of Catania, and it was right between Catania and Messina.
No. Okay.
I was born in 1947.
Okay. Now, when you were in Italy, did you speak English, or was
No.
it? So you were just strictly
I spoke Sicilian, I spoke Italian.
Are they two different languages?
It's, yes.
Or a dialect, or?
The dialect. We could understand Italians, but Italians can't understand us.
I gotcha. Okay. Tell us a little bit what family life was like in Sicily. What about your dad and mom? Tell us a little bit about them.
Yes, my dad, his name was Filippo, or Philip. My mother was Giuseppina, or Josephine. And of course, you know, I was born right after the war was over. The country was devastated from World War II. My father had served in the Italian army. In the late 30s, he was sent to Spain to fight in Spain, and then, of course, he came on, married my mother, and then World War II, of course, began, and he was again drafted in the Italian army, where he spent the next 3 years until the Italians surrendered to the Allies.
So, if your dad was in the army in his first tour, what did he do? What was his job?
He was an infantry,
Okay.
a rifleman.
But then he came home, and then they could draft you. I mean, you
Oh,
weren't
yeah.
you weren't like an experienced soldier that was just getting pulled up again.
Oh yeah, you have to understand. In Italy, you could get at that time, you know, you were out of the army, but you're not out of the army. They call you at any time, and he was called for the second time because of World War II, and you know, and he did spend the next 3 years. He was wounded and I think he had a bout of malaria, and you know. But after World War II, of course, the country being devastated, there wasn't much work. And in 1954, his brother sponsored him to come here.
By the way, I'm going to back you up just a little. Did the
Sure.
Marshall Plan help Italy?
Helped Italy, but not so much Sicily.
Oh, okay.
Everything was concentrated in the major cities in Italy.
Okay.
But
I
Sicily,
didn't realize that.
yeah, Sicily was still at the bottom of the list.
So when your dad got out after World War II, what did he pursue, a trade, or what did?
No, he was a stonemason. He was a stonemason. You know, and they normally they would build houses or bridges or what have you, and but of course, you know, there wasn't much need for that because no one had money.
It's just
Yeah.
it's kind of hard for us sitting here today to even fathom, isn't it? What the ravages of war, like in World War II, just absolutely destroyed.
It did, and we were right in the path of the invasion, because right in front of us was the sea, you know, the ocean, and behind us was the mountains, and of course in the mountains, the Germans and the Italians had the big guns shooting at the fleet, and my mother, that lived with my grandmother at the time while my father was away, their house was right near the railroad station. So it constantly air bombardments and naval bombardments, and you know, and they really went through hell during during the invasion.
Did they
Yeah.
talk to you about much, did they, with, as far as what it was like during those days, did you?
Not, my mother started talking about it when she was getting up in years.
Okay.
And even to the end, when, before she passed away, 4 years ago, she always talked about the town and how they had to evacuate and run up to the mountains. The Americans and the British would drop leaflets telling the civilians to get out of the town because they were going to bomb. And sure enough, they would, go up to the mountains where, people have farms and what have
Wow.
you. And they would wait for the bombardment or the bombings. The air, the airplanes. And she remembers very well. She remembered an American plane that was shut down and landed right near the river.
Oh my.
And even my uncle told me when I visited back in Italy, he showed me the exact spot. And he says the people went down to the river, retrieved the body, took the body away, and to make sure that the Germans didn't get it, And then after the invasion, when the troops were coming up, they, they showed them where the body was,
Mhm.
The Sicilian people did not like the German people or the German soldiers, and they did not like the fascists, which Mussolini was part of it. They could never understand why we would fight against Americans, where most of the people, especially in my town, have relatives in America.
That would really be
Yeah.
that would be a tough spot.
My father's brother was in the American Army, but thank God he went to England, and that's where he spent his time. He was in the U.S. Army Air Corps,
Oh yeah.
and so he spent his time in England. Thank God he never went to Italy, because two of his brothers were in the Italian. My father was in the Army, and my uncle Joe was in the Air Force. Yeah, but my mother always talked about it. She always talked about the suffering and and the lack of food but they survived. My sister was a little girl at the time.
I was gonna that was gonna be my next question, is when did your folks start having a family? I mean, at what point during this?
When my father left for the second time, for the Army a second time, my mother was pregnant with my sister Angie. And and of course during the invasion, during the bombings, so my sister was about 3 years old.
Okay.
My brother was born in 44. Well, things were still bad, but not quite as bad. Now, I was born in 47, January 47, but I remember as a kid going to school and walking up the street, and the school was a farmhouse, and everywhere there were posters, showing ammunition, shells, and different mines and what have you, and telling us not to touch anything.
Wow.
Because as kids we always have a tendency, we see something, we grab it.
Oh, sure.
And I remember even at the school, it was a one-room farmhouse.
Several
school.
grades.
There was from the first to the third, I think I was in that.
Mhm.
And then they built a school right in the town, at the edge of the town, where it was up to the 5th grade. So the 4th and 5th grade, I actually did at the other school, which was more modern. And,
Sure. So, so then, did you have any more brothers or sisters after you?
No, I was the youngest.
You're the baby, okay.
I was the
At
youngest.
what point did your folks either think or have the opportunity, they said, we're gonna go to the United States?
Well, My father always kept in touch with his brother here, and finally his brother told him, because things were so bad there. He says, I'll sponsor you. You come here, and get a job here. And that's exactly what he did. He got here in October of '55, and then 3.5 years later, he made enough money to bring us over.
So it wasn't a mass migration. The whole
No.
family, just your dad went?
Just my dad came first. Yeah, he stayed at my uncle's house for a while, but then he got a job in Chester, Pennsylvania, with a contractor there, and he stayed with a cousin in Chester, and of course that's where we came to. He, eventually in January 1959, I remember the ship docked in New York, and of course it was the 13th of January, and it was the coldest day of my life because I'd never experienced cold. Like in Sicily, it's always warm. When we say it's cold in Sicily, we're talking about 50, 60 degrees,
Sure.
And so all of a sudden I'm looking at ice on the harbor,
Sure.
and snowflakes. Some kids didn't even know what snowflakes were. They were calling them white flies.
Sure.
But and we came to Chester. We settled there, and
So when the family did come, did they all come?
yeah, it was my brother, my sister, and my mother.
Okay.
Yeah, we all came together.
But
And,
you didn't speak English at that point?
No, I knew one word which I'd rather not say because
Yeah.
my grandmother used to tell me that. And no, I had to learn from scratch, and the kids from the neighborhood, I would hang around with them, and of course they didn't speak Italian. It was always hand gestures, and we used to play basketball, or I used to kick the ball because I was used to soccer.
Oh, yes.
And and little by little, I started picking up. And then one day, it was during the elections, and I heard John Kennedy, and I'll never forget when he was on his inauguration, he made that speech. He says, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And that was kind of stuck to my mind. So in 1965, when I saw that the country was at war, I thought it was my obligation to give back, and so the day that my buddy got his draft notice, I kind of talked him into going in the Marines, About 3 days in Paris Island, he wanted to kill me, but that's...
Did they have a buddy program?
Yes,
So
it was.
Did they say you two guys would at least be together for
At least, yes.
basic and AIT, or?
Just for basic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which happened? So you
Yes.
two guys went through
We
that
went
together?
on a buddy plan, and sure enough, we did. We went to Paris Island, and we started out, and of course, I thought I could speak English, but I really didn't speak English that well because I couldn't understand the drill instructors half of the times because of the way they talked in Paris Island. And but little by little, I picked up.
You have an interesting story though about when you actually went in to the Marine Corps recruiter and said we want to join.
Yes.
And what was his first question to you?
He asked me, he says, "Where you from?" And of course I told him, I said, "I'm from Chester, Pennsylvania." He says, No, where you from?" So I gave him the exact address, 2307 Madison Street, Chester, Pennsylvania. He says, "You can't even speak English. Where the hell are you from?" So I says, "Well, I'm from Sicily, Italy, And he says, "Are you an American citizen?" I says, "No." He says, "Well, I don't know if I could do this, And John, my buddy, says, "Well, if he doesn't go in, I don't go in." So the next day he called me. He did check it out, and I had to go through the process, of course, again, fingerprinting, the typical police background. And then I had to go to the federal courthouse and get sworn in and it says it was a declaration of intent to become an American citizen. And they actually give you an actual certificate, you know, and with your picture and all the personal data on it, was saying that you were declaring that you were going to be an American citizen. And I did that, you know. So after Paris Island, or at the end of Paris Island, I remember I asked my drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Henley, I says, when can I become an American citizen? He says, why? He says, wait till you get your duty, to your regular duty station. Well, I went through ITR, went on for 20 days, went to Pendleton. Of course, Pendleton was a staging area. And you know, it wasn't an actual duty station. It was additional training, and then from there you go to.
That was the stepping off point.
That was a stepping off
Yeah.
point. And I'll never forget that one night. They says, okay, you know, everybody's going to pack your sea bag, you know. You know, I guess in the Army they call it duffel bag.
Right.
We called them sea bag, and we're going to El Toro Air Base, and you guys are going to be off, you know. And sure enough, they put us in these what we call cattle cars, and they transported us to El Toro Air Base, and from there we were off.
Now in the Army, after we got done with AIT, we knew where we were going, obviously, and we
Yeah.
knew we were 11 Bravos, which
Right.
was infantry.
Right.
But everybody went their separate way, and we never saw anybody again. When we showed up at Oakland, we were on our own.
Yeah.
Did you guys stay as a unit and
No.
go? Oh, so it was kind of
No,
the same thing?
Same thing. What we did was everybody had orders, and of course, like the drill instructor had said halfway through boot camp, he says, 95% of you guys are going to be 0311s, and you're all going to Westpac, which is Western Pacific, which means Vietnam. And sure enough, but when we got to ITR in Camp Geiger, Camp Lejeune, everybody had a different MOS. So if you're, you know, the machine gunner, you went with a weapons platoon.
Oh, okay.
You know, and you train with them. And
Was anybody lucky enough to be a radio man up on top of a hill someplace?
well, we had a few guys in communications, but they didn't. You know, they ended up with a PR-25 on their back. Yeah. But yeah, and that's basically we went to you know, California eventually, and then we noticed that some guys didn't show up. You know, and I always wonder why. Well, one guy ended up, his mom passed away or whatever, and but the rest of us, you know, got to California, but then they started breaking them up, putting them in different platoons or different companies, and by the time we left on a C-141 Air Force plane from El Toro, there were only a few guys that I actually went through boot camp with, you know. And then we got to Okinawa. We stopped in Okinawa for a few days, and then from there, of course, we went to Da Nang, and some of the guys went to the 3rd Marine Division, and some of us went to the 1st Marine Division. That was the only 2 divisions at the time, and so we went to division headquarters. And you know, then they told us.
What was your first impression of Vietnam when you got off the plane?
When they opened that door of that C-141, and I'm going down, and you feel the heat from, you know, it was so unbearably hot.
Instant sweat.
Instant. I mean, instant. You know, by the time I got down to the bottom, I was soaking wet.
Sure.
Yeah. But
Was there
eventually,
any different smell about Vietnam than you'd been used to?
Well, we could smell the jet fuel, of course, being at the airport. But once we got to the division headquarters, you know, you smelled, I guess, with the soil or whatever. But there was some places that really smelled bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were there a couple of days until myself and a few other guys were assigned to the 5th Marine Regiment. And so we got down there, they sent us down to July. That's where the 5th Marines were at the time.
Was there any rumors that you were hearing about what the Marines were doing at that time in Vietnam? Or when you found out you were going to the 5th, did anybody say, oh, brother, that might not be a good...
No, actually, nobody mentioned that because I think nobody really wanted to know. You know, I know one thing. The guys that were going to the 3rd Marine Division, some of those guys were going up to the DMZ, you know, which was Quintrell and Dong Hat. And so in a sense, I was kind of glad that I was going south to July. And then in July, they took us, some went to the 1st Regiment, 2nd, and 3rd. We went to the 2nd Regiment, myself and a few other guys. And there, we were assigned to the companies, and we were assigned to Echo Company. And I'll never forget the first sergeant telling us, you know, we're going to go up and see the colonel. You know,
So he was your first contact? He was the welcoming?
Yes, the
Okay.
first Sergeant Howard. I'll never forget. He was never smile. He had these glasses that looked like Ben Franklin glasses, and he'd give you a look, and when he gave you that look, you better not open your mouth. But anyway, he scared the hell out of me. But eventually, he told us, he says, we're going to go up and see Colonel Moore, Lieutenant Colonel Moore. He was the battalion commander. So we went. He wanted to meet every single Marine that came to that 2-5, what we call 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. And he did, you know, so we went and we stated our rank and name.
What did you go over there as?
As a private.
E1?
He won. A couple of days later, I was told I was a PFC. You know, I didn't know, but I must have made PFC and
Sure.
In ITR. I just never knew until I got there.
You noticed that your pay went from $80 a month to $98 a month, and you were tickled
Well, I
to
went to
death.
$87 a month. $87 a month that I never saw. You know? But anyway, and then you know, after we introduced ourselves and everything, and he's telling us about Echo Company. He says that is the best company in the battalion. You know, and he says you have a great company commander, Captain Jim Cooper. They called him Big Jim Cooper. He was Irish from Ireland that fought in World War II and Korea, and big guy.
And this guy had experience.
Oh yeah, Big Jim Cooper, we used to call him. And he says, but Echo Company is not here. You know, they're out on place called Tammy Trung or Hill 76, you know, quite a few miles west, you know. And he says, you're going to really like Echo Company, you know. And then as we're walking out, he says, yeah, they're the best company, but they also had the most casualties.
Why did he have to say that?
I wish he had kept that to himself. But anyway, so I think it was not the next day, but the following day, a patrol came in, and they told us to, you know, get our packs. And
had you been assigned a weapon yet?
yes,
Okay.
we were assigned M14. Actually, the M14 we were assigned when we were in Da Nang.
Okay.
And yeah, so we had M14s. We had our weapons. I remember that morning we had packed sea rations, extra socks, and an extra pair of trousers, shirt, and I remember the flak jacket. They gave us flak jackets. Well, the flak jacket that we were issued were from the Korean War.
And they were those olive drab, heavy.
Heavy, and some were ripped, and
Sure.
the plates would come out. You know? I mean, they were really bad. But anyway, so when our patrol came in, they says we're going to leave in about 30 minutes to get your stuff together, and sure enough, and I'll never forget, as soon as we crossed that concertine wire from the battalion, and they says, okay, lock and load, and then we spread out. We had
Did you meet the captain at that point?
no, they were out in
Oh, so this was what, like a squad of guys that had come in and,
yeah, there were 7 of us.
so they just, what did they tell you to do? Just follow in behind and just,
Yes.
we'll tell you what
Yeah,
to do?
actually, the sergeant that had the patrol, he was with Echo Company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he came in to bring a couple of guys. I guess they were going on R&R or
Okay,
whatever.
okay, sure.
And then he would take us over. And once we got out of the concertine wire, the perimeter, we started staggering 15 meters apart, on both sides.
If you bunch up, one round will get you all.
That's right. That was well, we learned that at Paris Island, and especially at Geiger or Lejeune.
And I gotta back up, because I forgot to ask, when did you actually step foot in Vietnam? What was the date?
I honestly don't remember the exact day. I know it was right after Memorial Day, because
Okay.
Memorial Day we were in Okinawa, so it had to have been.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it must have been early June when we actually
Of
landed.
1966.
66.
Okay, so
1966.
you know what I was
Yeah.
doing when you were stepping foot in Vietnam? I was receiving my diploma out of high school.
Well,
So,
yeah, but now the battalion itself, 2-5, the whole battalion went together, and that was only that was in January of '66. So we were now the replacements.
Yeah.
We were replacements. Yeah. So we went, and I'll tell you, when you first set foot outside the perimeter, and all of a sudden he's telling you 15 meters apart, keep your eyes on the right, the guys on the left, and when he said lock and load, well, that kind of hit you,
was that like the first reality check?
That was the first reality check,
Yeah.
and we walked down, then we walked through rice paddies, and then we walked through wooded areas that you couldn't even see the sky,
Yeah, triple canopy.
And then eventually, it took us a couple hours, but eventually we got to this village called Temi Trung. And there was a hill there, it was called Hill 76. And we always had a team on top of Hill 76 with a 106. 106 was a recoilless rifle.
Yeah.
They used to fire periodically, just to harass the enemy.
H&I.
H&I, exactly.
Yeah.
So once we got into the inside the perimeter of the company, which kind of surrounded the whole village, and and I started looking around. All of a sudden, here I am with these utilities or fatigues with, they look very new, and I'm looking at these guys, and some of these guys, they have no shirt on, the trousers are ripped, and I'm saying, boy, these guys must have been going through hell, and yeah, so we.
And by the way, you would have never gotten away with that in AIT.
And no, absolutely not. No, you had to have storage utilities. But anyway, so we went in, and then eventually we met Captain Cooper, and then we had the 3 platoon commanders, and of course myself, Doug Weaver, Ed Greavy, Bob Harrison, and Nelson. The 5 of us went to the 3rd platoon, and the commanding officer was Terry Ebert, First Lieutenant Terry Ebert. He had this handlebar mustache, and and right away, you could tell this guy was a squared away guy.
Yep.
And so he set us around, and I don't even know how we sat around. I don't even remember that. but I remember him talking to us. You know, he says, you guys are, you have to be careful, you know, you have to protect each other, you know, this is not Pendleton or Lejeune, this is a war zone, you know. And then he had the squad leaders, the 3 squad leaders that came, and myself and Doug Weaver and Nelson went to the 3rd squad.
Okay.
Bob and Harrison and Ed Greavy went to the 2nd squad. And yeah, and that's the way it was, at least when we first got there, you know. And then from that very first night, we didn't go out on any night ambush or patrols the first 2 days, you know. I think it was on the 3rd day we went out on a patrol, and it was unbearably hot, and you're constantly soaking wet. And of course, some of the guys didn't even wear shirts. You know, they just had the flak jacket.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I was just trying to get used to you know, I was in pretty fit, you know, physical shape, you know, and but I'll tell you what, when you walk in that heat, and then all of a sudden you're walking in those rice paddies, and you're knee deep in mud or water, and you know, no matter how good of a shape you're in, it takes a toll on you, and it took a while to get used to it. Now the first few patrols we went on, it was nothing, you know. But then I remember one day we were on patrol.
I gotta ask you,
Yeah.
did they say that they had an objective at that point? When you guys would go out somewhere, did they say, what we're doing today is?
Well, the objective, I think, the way I understood it from the very beginning that I set foot in Temmy Trunk Village, was to protect the village.
Okay.
And you know, and we had the whole village completely surrounded with bunkers and what have you, and you know, and then we would go out on patrols, different areas, you know, to look, what we call a search and destroy
Oh,
mission.
yeah.
You know, and but the very first casualty that I saw was, we were on patrol, and there was an Amtrak, you know, that's equivalent to armor personnel carrier,
Sure,
I guess.
sure.
And that thing hit a mine, and there was I think they were.
Were they out there with you?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it was a different
Okay.
different unit. I think they were part of the 7th Marines, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken. But they were carrying Vietnamese soldiers. And I'll never forget, as we got there, they were carrying this one ARVN soldier, you know, Vietnamese soldier, that was missing a leg. And that was the actual first casualty that I actually saw, you know. And, yeah, but after a while, the more patrols that we did, you know, the more, I guess, the more confidence that I gained.
When was the first time you actually got involved in a firefight?
It was about a week or so after we got there. There was a chopper, I think, that got shot down, and that was not far from us, but still was pretty far. And we went there to guard the chopper, and they were constantly hitting us, and we're just returning fire until the UEs and the gunships and another unit came in, and but that was the very first time.
Did the Viet Cong and the NVA, when we would call in support, they'd fight for about 5 minutes and disappear? Was it kind of like that? Once they heard the choppers coming, did they him out of the area pretty much?
In July, when we were down in July, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
You know, and we were there for a couple months. Let's see, it was June and July, and then at the beginning of August, that was the 1st of August, if I'm not mistaken, we went on a big operation. It was called Operation Colorado, And I'll never forget because the day before the operation, they took us all to the beach in July near the air base. And they had steaks, they had grills out there. They
Oh,
built,
wow.
and they had steaks, hamburgers, all kinds of stuff. And
You know, we should probably cut this part of the interview out, because I think any Army guy that watches this is gonna start cussing right about now. I think the Army guys are gonna want you to shut the video off now. Steaks and grills at the beach. And I bet Donnie and Marie came and played. Sorry, go ahead.
but anyway, they had this, you know, and we could go actually swimming on
Sure.
the South China Sea, and I never forget, man. I was really stuffed with you know, first time you got steak.
Real
Well, we're
food.
out in the field. We're always eating sea rations.
food.
Yeah, real food, and as I'll never forget, as we're leaving to go back to Hill 69 for the next day, you know, to start loading the choppers and go on Operation Colorado. One of the guys, old timer, says, "Yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoy that because some of you guys might not be back." You know,
Mm.
that's what they used to do in World War II. I think they used to feed those guys really good before
Before the big one?
before the big one. Yep. And at that time, Operation Colorado, according to Colonel Moore, was the biggest operation of the Vietnam War.
Oh, my goodness.
And they said we're going to get more air support than they had during the whole Tarawa
Oh.
campaign of World War II. We had B-52s, all kinds of air power, and it was a regimental size operation.
That is big.
And I have never in my life seen so many choppers at one time. Yeah, and that was the first time that they actually put us in what we call Sea Knights, 46s. They're like the Chinooks, the Marine Corps equivalent to the Chinook.
Okay.
You know.
So
And,
now you're going to take a helicopter ride.
We're going to take a helicopter ride, and because prior to that we had been in helicopters, but it was the 34s,
Mm-hmm.
UH-34s.
Is that where the pilot's kind of up high? And,
Right.
Okay.
Sikorsky, I think it was Sikorsky.
Yeah.
But they can only put 7 guys in there. After 7 guys, that thing won't take off.
Yep, okay.
But the 46s, you know, you put a whole, you know, a couple squads in
Sure.
there. And I'll never forget, they were taking us to a place above Tamkey, you know, when we got close to where we're going, I noticed some of the guys were taking their flak jackets off, putting her on the floor, and they were sitting on a flak jacket, you know. And I asked somebody, I says, "Why is that?" He says, "Because they're going to shoot right through
God help
the
us.
chopper," you know. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm glad it didn't happen. And we landed, and I mean, you know, as soon as we landed and got out of those choppers, everybody's, you know, spreading out. And I was so thirsty, I kept drinking water. Well, after a while, I drank so much water that I started, you know, throwing up, you know. And I'll never forget this one guy looked at me, he said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Just, you know." He said, "All right." He said, and we moved out, and we had no idea at the time, at least we didn't, maybe the higher echelons did. We were chasing about 6,000 MVAs and Viet Congs, and yeah.
Did the Marines have a blocking force somewhere out there?
Yes, they had different units. You know, when 2-5 landed, I think 3-5 might have been
Yep, okay.
another.
Because basically they were trying to do the hammer and anvil
Exactly.
thing. Okay.
Yeah. We really didn't hit much stuff. We had some firefights. It was the first time that I actually saw green tracers.
Mm-hmm.
They were Chinese tracers. You know, the first time I saw that, I says, you know, what are those things? You know, you know, and somebody told me, he says, they're green tracers and they're Chinese, you know. And, you know, that lasted about 2 weeks, that operation. Now, one company, Charlie Company, a 1-5, they nearly got wiped out. I mean, they were really, really almost decimated, you know. But for us, it wasn't too bad. We had some casualties, but it wasn't too bad.
Were any of those guys that got hurt by you?
You mean friendly fire?
No, I mean,
Like
were
area
you,
location.
in other words, were the guys next to you or down the line, or?
Not at that point.
Okay,
Not then, you know.
Because I was gonna
Yeah.
ask you, when's the first time? By the way, how long had you been in Vietnam when Colorado started?
2 months.
3?
Two.
Oh,
2
okay,
months.
so you're still pretty green.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm still the young guy.
And were you E2 or did you get
E3.
Okay, so now
I didn't even know I was E3.
Okay, so
E3 until one day, I think it was the gunny, saw me and Hill 69 before we went up north. And they saw I had, because in the rear area you wore your the chevrons.
yeah.
And I had the PFC chevron. He says, Silvestri, I thought you were Lance Corporal. I says, nobody told me. You know, that's when I realized I was a Lance Corporal. And, you know, but I remember when Colorado was over, they airlifted us to Tamkey, which was south of Da Nang, but north of Chulai. And Tamkey was outside of the town of Tamkey. And supposedly, we had no idea whether we were going back or whether it was actually over, or, you know. But, you know, evidently there was some other unit that had been there because there were bunkers all around, you know. And, you know, and I'll never forget, they were bringing the chaplains in. You know, they were going to have religious services. And a good friend of mine that I made friends with while we were in Temitron, his name was John Edgerly. He was from Michigan. And he says, Joe, you're a Catholic. You're from Italy. You know, they're bringing a chaplain in. You know, we're going to go to Mass. I says, no, I'm not going to go. He says, no, you got to go. You know, he talked me into it.
Okay.
We went to Mass. You know, when I said Mass, it was outside. You know, the
couple of ammo boxes.
Yeah, exactly. And he had the chalice and all that.
Sure.
And so the Mass is over. We're going back to the company area, and all of a sudden there was a thunderstorm coming. You know, you could see the clouds. You know, and the rain started. So John says, "Man, I'm going to take a shower." You know, that's you know, first time. You know, the only time you got washed was when you crossed a river or
fresh water.
Fresh water. So we got under. We made a makeshift tent with ponchos. You know, putting ponchos together. So we're under the poncho, and here's John out there. You know, bare ass naked. You know, with a bar of soap. I don't know where he got the bar of soap, but he, you know, he's taking you know, he's washing himself, and all of a sudden there was a flash, and we're all knocked over, and I thought it was a mortar attack, you know, and you know, as soon as I was able to see, everybody is on the ground. The ponchos is completely gone.
Oh my gosh.
And it's only little pieces, you know.
Wow.
And here's John laying there with his mouth wide open, his eyes wide open, you know, and he's down, you know. And I thought he got hit. I honestly thought it was a mortar shell. And I said to Jim Ogilvie, he was my squad leader, I says, John is hit, you know. He said, he's not hit. There wasn't a mortar, you know. And all of a sudden, our skipper, Lieutenant Terry Eber, he comes running down because by that time we got about a foot of water on the ground. You're a bolt of lightning hit
Good night.
right where we were, and unfortunately it hit right through John, and it traveled down to the 2nd platoon area where it killed another guy there. And
Oh my gosh.
and
So he didn't die?
he did die.
The shower guy?
He was dead before he hit the ground.
Oh my Lord.
And he was he was grounded,
Yep.
naked feet in water.
Yep, he was.
I mean it. Oh,
You know, yeah, he was out, and Lieutenant Eber was screaming for everybody to get to the high ground, get out of the water and get to the
Yes.
high ground, which we did. And I remember the two corpsmen, Doc Drum and Doc. I forgot his last name, but anyway, Joe Wallach, Doc Wallach. Both of them are pounding on his chest trying to revive him, but they couldn't do it. You know, he was dead.
hmm.
And the other kid, he was from New York, second platoon. He was dead. You know, and so that night, you know, we had bunker duty. You know, so we went around and we got to our bunker, and it was myself, Doug Weaver, Nelson, and Slim, Bob Walsh. He was from Colorado, and of course everybody's talking about John Edgerly, and they're talking about religion. You know, the fact I told them, I said we just went to mass.
Oh
you know,
yeah,
we just,
yeah.
You know, and I think with Slim, you know, I called him Slim because he was about 6'5", and
Sure.
And he says, you know, it was God's will. You know, maybe took him out of his misery, maybe, you know, and he's trying to justify.
Oh, of
it,
course,
you know.
sure.
And but it really bothered me, you know. Well, the operation was pretty much over after that, and then when we went back to July.
Did you hear whether or not that was successful? Did the Marines
Yes.
accomplish what they wanted to do?
Yes, it was
So they
very-
must have wasted a lot of
Yes, because
NVA.
I remember one night, as we're in this one area, and somebody told us there was going to be a B-52 strike,
Oh,
you know, and I remember sitting there, and it's pitch dark out, you know, there's no moon out, you know, no stars, you know, it was not quite overcast, you know, but it was really dark. I mean, it's, and all of a sudden I hear this rumbling noise. You could feel the ground
Oh,
shaking,
yes.
you know. And here it was a B-52 strike, but you couldn't hear the planes. You know, I'd never heard the
they're
planes.
35,000
Oh,
feet
they're
up in
way,
the air.
way above that. You know, and I said to myself, may God help those guys that are under that thing, man. You know, because you know nobody could survive.
No.
You know, if they're anywhere near there. You know, but it was. They say it was a very successful operation. Of course, we didn't know. We just, you know, the lower level guys. The only thing I knew from that time, actually from even before we went on operation, every time we set up somewhere, I was looking after the guy next to me, on my right, on my left, and I was hoping that they were doing the same thing,
Yep.
you know, and that's the way it was, you know.
Did you ever get to take an R&R?
Yes,
Where did you go?
went to Japan.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Went to,
How long had you been there before you got to go?
Uh,
6 months or so?
Yeah, that was in November. I remember it was November. And I'll never forget the gunny came up to me. He says, Silvestri, you going on R&R? I said, I want to go to Australia. He says, why you want to go to Australia? I says, I have relatives in Australia. I have cousins, aunts, uncles. He says, well, you're not going to Australia.
Those were tough to, no, those were hard to get.
Well, at that time, no Marines were going to Australia. I think the Army had just started.
I mean, man, I'm telling you, it was hard to get that.
But anyway, the bottom line, he says, you're going to Japan, you know. So here I am, 19 years old now, and I'm going to Japan. He says, by the way, you got to have $500. I says, where am I going to get $500, you know? He says, well, when you go back the Hill 69, the battalion, they'll tell you how much money you got. I have about $300 because I never got paid, you know.
It was always going to something.
Yeah, it was, or it
Sending
never
home
caught up
or-
with us, you
Or
know.
sending it home or something.
Yeah, no, they weren't sending it home. It just the one time that I get pay was with NPCs,
Oh, yeah,
military
yeah,
payment
sure.
certificates. But anyway, he says you got about $300 on your the payment that accumulated, and he said you need a couple $100 more. So everybody chipped in,
No
and
kidding.
yeah, everybody chipped in. They gave me a couple $100
Why did he say you needed $500?
so that you could survive
Yeah, they wouldn't-
for 5 days out
Yeah.
there on your own.
Get a room,
Yeah.
eat,
And,
if you went for some,
Now
Extra-
again,
Yeah.
another contradiction with the Army guys. We've heard stories with Army guys where one guy went to Australia and he had $50 to last him a week, and he.
but the Army never told you what you had, they never even
He
asked
got a
you.
hotel room and a piece of salami this big, and he ate on it.
Yeah,
for
that's
a
what he
whole
ate for a week.
I can't believe that. No, they want to make sure that you didn't go out there and get stuck out there somewhere.
Sure.
And of course, I wanted to.
And it wouldn't look good if a United States Marine was on the corner panhandling.
Yeah,
Or
no,
begging
no.
for money.
No, that would not be.
Did you get any expensive clothes made or a suit
No,
made or anything?
no. I was 19 years old, and all of a sudden I found myself in Tokyo. Actually, we landed in Tokyo. They took us to an army base at Camp Zama, Japan, in Yokohama. It was a Green Beret camp, and there they says, okay, you can wear a uniform, So I had to take my the khaki uniform that I had, and I had to get a pair of pants. They didn't have a shirt my size, so I had to get a sweater. So I had a sweater and a pair of pants, and I didn't realize, coming from Vietnam where it's very hot, but Japan was cold in November.
It snows there.
Yeah, I know. Well, I had no idea. So anyways, I stayed in Tokyo one night. It was very expensive. So the next day, I got on a train, went down to Yokosuka in Japan. There's a naval base there, and I was really in the mood for a hamburger, and I want to have an American hamburger.
Sure.
And somebody told me, go down to Yokosuka, the naval base, and they'll make you a hamburger. And so I went down there, and I met a guy that I was in boot camp with. He was there. He got shot in the stomach, and he was at the naval hospital there, and now he was waiting to go back.
Sure.
And so I saw John Teresi, and then we started hanging around and drinking. And there was a club there, and lots of clubs.
Did you ever go in one of those geisha bathhouses?
Not in Japan, no. But I
Someplace else?
yeah. I met up with somebody where I spend the rest of the time with, and I remember the bathtub. It wasn't like a standard bathtub. They're high, and that's where it was. I'm sorry, there was a place that we went where they actually have families, and see naked women, naked men, the kids, and
Sure.
that was, I don't know if they call that a geisha house. Is that what that is?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, but I remember one time this girl that I was with. That's where we went, But for the most part, I spent 5 days.
Did you come out of that experience squeaky clean?
Yeah, I would say not. I'd rather not discuss it. But I'll never forget. I'll never forget when I was leaving. I remember she and her friend took me to Camp Zama, Yokohama, and I remember she gave me a bunch of money back. I says, I don't want that, Oh, and I had bought some liquor the night before. There was an American club. It's called the Alliance Club, which was a part of the base, but it was off the base. And I remember I bought liquor, whiskey and vodka and things, and I had what they call my AWOL bag.
Yeah.
And so I had a bunch of bottles there, and then she was giving me money back. I says, well, I don't have any use for that where I'm going, you keep it, And she said, no, Well, anyway, I took a few dollars, but I told her to keep the rest. Then as we're boarding the buses to go to the airport, they have a Green Beret guy standing at the door, and he's yelling, he says, "No beer and no bottles will board this bus." Well, I'll tell you what, you could hear the clanging sound on the bags, you know, and then one guy's yelling, he says, "What do you mean, no bottles?"
Sure.
He says, "That's the rule, no bottles." And all of a sudden, I think he had about 70 guys around him, and he backed off. I think we loaded one bus, and the rest of the guys went on the other bus. We got to the plane in Tokyo, and I remember I brought those bottles back for the guys.
Well, I was just gonna say, the buddies were expecting you to bring something back.
Yeah, and but you know, everybody you know, enjoyed it. To me, R&R was an experience.
Yeah.
You know, something that I never experienced in my life
Well,
before.
and it was a week out of an unbelievable
Right.
experience. In other
Yes.
words, from going from Vietnam in the jungle or in combat to Japan
the
was a
real-
week of.
Civilization,
Yeah.
real civilization.
Now you've got to go back.
Now I got to go back.
Tell me about that.
And I remember we landed in July. Landed in Da Nang. Got a hop on the chopper to July. Then I'm waiting for a convoy to take me to Hill 69, and there's no convoy. You know, and somebody told me, he says, "There's no more trucks." You know, so I started walking. Now here I am with my you know,
Civilian?
tropical uniform. No,
Oh.
no, I got my uniform back in Camp Zama, and so, you know, and I'm walking, and I get to Highway 1, which runs along the coast there. So I'm starting to walk to Hill 69, which is a few miles up, you know, and by that time I'm already soaking wet. And this guy pulls up in a pickup truck, you know, a civilian. And he says, "Where you going?" I says, "I'm going to Hill 69. He says, "Well, you better get in here, you know, it's going to be dark soon." You know. I said, "All right." You know, I got in, and I noticed he had a grease gun on the dashboard, you know.
A Thompson?
No, it was like what the guys carrying the tanks. It wasn't a Thompson, but it was, I don't know. We called her a grease gun.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
But anyway, and he says, you know, "I'll take you to Hill 69. I'll drop you off there." He says, "You can't be out in the dark, you know." Of course, I knew that. I was just
Sure.
going to try to do my best to get back there before dark. And I says, "You're a civilian?" And he smiled. He says, "Yeah, you know." And well, then I found out there were CIA guys with Air America, or
Yeah.
you know, I had no idea at the time. You know, when I was telling you know, my squad leader back at the Hill 69, he says, "No, they're not civilians. They're CIA guys." You know.
They're on the payroll.
Yeah, they're on the payroll. But anyway, and right after that is when we went up north. You know, they shipped the whole battalion to Amwa, you know, the place about 20 miles west of Da Nang, south and west of Da Nang. And, well, that's a whole different ball game. Because there now we're fighting not only Viet Cong regular soldiers, but we're fighting the regular North Vietnamese units. Because just west where we were in Laos, that's where the Ho Chi Minh Trail came in.
Yep.
You know, and from there on, it was not a very pleasant time.
Yeah. You know, I always said that the Viet Cong were pound for pound for they'd been there and fighting so long. They were the wiliest,
They were.
enemy that we ever fought.
Yeah.
But the NVA were trained.
They were.
I mean, in other words, now we're up against some boys that have purpose. I mean,
Yes.
they have, like you had, they have missions. Viet
That's right.
Cong were kind of
Yeah,
go
they-
here and hit that, and
Scatter, and like you had mentioned before, you fight for about 5-10 minutes, and they're gone. Yeah.
but the
But with
NBA,
NBA,
different
was
story.
a totally different ball game. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, and this, because of your Italian background, did you get any awesome packages from family or
Oh,
home?
yes.
I can only
Pepperonis,
imagine.
sausages.
Yes. My mother would send me packages, and and of course there'll be the salami and
Yes.
the various other Italian pastries, and
Did guys
Okay.
just crawl up to you and
Soon
just
as-
begging and?
as soon as I got a package, the whole squad will be
Oh,
there.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, she always sent me packages, and years later she would tell me that she would go to the post office, and of course the thing would weigh about 20 pounds, and the mailman would always make sure that she didn't pay the full price. She said, the mailman was, in those days everybody was a former military.
Yeah.
And that guy will always tell her, your son deserves this. And,
Yes.
But yes, I used to get all kinds of goodies from back home.
Yeah.
One of the vets said that his family, his father sent a pizza.
A pizza. And,
Oh,
And
this
by
is
the-
a funny
and
story.
by
This
the
is a
time-
true story.
By the time it got there, it was molded. And they said that none of the guys cared. They just wiped the
did.
mold off and ate the pizza.
well, believe me, sometimes, you'll do anything to get something that resembles
Home.
home.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Now, I never got anything that was molded.
Yeah.
Except the cigarettes and my sea rations.
Yeah.
The sea rations that we were eating in 1966 and 1967 were from 1951,
Correct.
from the Korean War. But anyway, like I said, we went up north, and then we really started running.
Were you getting in some gunfights up there?
Yes, absolutely. From the very beginning. From the time that we got there, we
What rank
replaced
were you at this point?
Lance Corporal.
So you're still a Lance,
Still
okay.
a Lance Corporal. And,
That you knew of.
that I knew of. But anyway,
Did any of your guys get killed up there? At
Yes.
at that point, when you first moved
yes,
north?
there were a couple guys that were killed, and not from my squad, but they were from a
You know,
platoon.
and I just have to have you share, what does this do to a combat Marine? When all of a sudden, I mean, Marines are trained to where it's just move forward.
Right.
When you start losing guys for real, what does that do to your thinking? What does that do to you? I mean, were you scared?
Well, you're scared at the beginning, and then you become numb to it,
Okay.
because after a while, it's just routine. You expect it. You hope it doesn't happen, but when it happens, you just keep moving, and by that time, believe me, I was really starting to feel numb, because when we first got there, we replaced the 9th Marines that went up north. But what I understand is that, even though NY was a pretty big base, we never spent any time there. We were on Mylock, Fullock, Nun Sung, which Nun Sung was a coal mine, the only coal mine in Vietnam.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and but in those areas it was really bad. And then we would go on these search and destroy missions. Now there are two rivers across from where we were: the Tupong River, and on the other side was the Bugia River, which was like a peninsula, which was, we didn't know this, but it was an R&R center for the enemy. Evidently, I don't know if the 9th Marines ever went there. Well, the very first time that we went across, I think it might have been Fox Company or Golf Company, they had about 40% casualties.
Man.
And then it was almost routinely that we kept going across that river. And by the end of November, I called the River of No Return because we never went across and came back with the same amount of guys.
Oh my.
Yep. And then, you know, we started getting replacements. In December, I mean, the company was down quite a bit, and we started getting more replacements.
And you've been there how long now?
Close to 6 months. About
Okay.
6 months. About
Okay.
6 months. And that's when Sammy Monroe came with Jimmy Reddington. You know, now I was a fire team leader at the time. My good friend Doug Weaver, which I was very close with, Doug was married. His son was born while we were in July.
Oh my.
And, you know, so in November, before we moved up north, Lieutenant Ebert sent Doug Weaver to Okinawa for a month for a Vietnamese school.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, okay. For language, right?
For language school, yeah. And I think he did it because he was married. And I was hoping he'd never come back, you know. And, but anyway, as we started getting all these replacements, you know, and we had been across that river a few times by now, you know, and we kept losing guys. And
Were you getting your share though? I mean, were you taking?
oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, it wasn't just a one-sided.
Oh no! You have to understand that for every one that we lost, they might have lost 10 or
Oh,
20.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I
you
just
know,
want to make sure
yeah.
we understand that you
No,
weren't
no,
just walking in there and.
No, the ratio as far as casualties, their casualty rates were, you know, they had to be really, really bad.
Yeah.
And you gotta wonder, what, you know, it's amazing, the ratio and the people that they lost, and it's like they weren't even being touched, because you just keep running into wave after
No,
wave
because
after wave.
they had nothing to lose in their mind
Yeah.
because that was their country.
Yes.
That was their country.
And they were going to
And
be there for 100 years if need be.
Absolutely.
Didn't
yes.
matter.
No, they already fought against the French and then the Japanese and then the French, and now they're fighting us.
Sure.
You know? But, you know, so when we got a bunch of replacements, Sammy Monroe and Jimmy Reddington came to our squad, and they got assigned to me. Well, 2 days later, we went on what was supposed to be a 2-day search and destroy mission. You know, so we took enough
Is that
food.
where they tell you double ammo, double C's,
Yes, well, you
extra
take,
pair of socks?
always have extra socks. You know, the corpsmen always tell you, keep your feet dry. There's no way in hell
No.
you could do that. You know, especially during the monsoon, you
Sure.
know, which was now monsoon. But anyway, so that was on the 16th of December. The 18th of December, we went out. I remember a couple of guys got hit on the 19th, and on the 20th, as we approached this one area, all hell broke loose. I mean, everything. You know, we got hit with machine guns, mortars, recoil rifles, RPGs, or I mean, we're really getting hit bad.
By the way, tell whoever's watching, tell them if you can, what it's like to see an RPG coming towards you.
I didn't see the RPG coming toward me, but other guys did. But I could see the machine gun fire coming, and I could see grenades being lobbed. You know, and they were using these Chi-Com grenades. Yep. And I remember one of those grenades landed right near me, and I felt the concussion of it, and you know, it was like an ocean wave inside my ears. You know, I mean, it was really bad. But I remember this one machine gun that was firing at us, and I remember yelling to Sammy Monroe. I kept yelling to him. I says, "Fire that M79. Get that, you know, put a couple rounds in there." But he, you know, didn't respond. I figured either he doesn't hear me or he froze.
Yeah.
It's his first combat mission.
And which would not be uncommon.
Nope. And so I didn't know exactly, you know, why. But after a while, I was able to crawl. It was like a field. It was like it must have been a farm because there were like rows of and these plants that looked like little trees. But I remember grabbing one and I fell backwards, and when I pulled back on it, the thing came in. It was like a big potato under it, you know. So it must have been like a potato field, but it's not the typical potatoes that I was used to because I used to work on a farm. But anyway, I finally reached where Monroe was. I didn't even know his name was Sammy at the time. I only knew Lance Corporal Monroe.
Sure.
You know, and you know, by now, you know, I'm getting a little angry, you know, because I keep yelling at him, you know, and he's like, you know, his face, his head, he's on a prone position, and his head is straight forward, you know. So finally, I was able to reach him, and I grabbed his shoulder, but as soon as I did, the helmet rolled right off, and he had been shot in the head. That was the 20th of December. And I know on the Vietnam Wall says the date of incident, the 24th of December. It was not. It was on the 20th. And, you know, so I thought he was dead. You know, so I was able to get the M79, and I was able to maneuver the ammo pouch off on him. And, you know, I fired a couple rounds, and either I got the machine gun or they moved. Yeah, and I was able to crawl over where his best buddy was, Jimmy Reddington. And Jimmy Reddington had his M14, and he's firing away because he had a semi-automatic. You know, only fire team leaders had the automatic.
And we were using clips of what, 10?
20.
Oh, 20 clips.
20
okay.
round magazine, 7.62. And so I gave the M79 to Jimmy Reddington, you know, the Lance Corporal Reddington. I didn't even know his name was Jimmy either, you know. Again, and to see the look on his face, he says, "Where's Sammy?" Yeah. I says, "Well, he got hit. Take the M79 and do your job." You know, that's how I'm telling him.
Get something out
Yep.
there.
So we were able to fight, you know. Eventually we were able to move. And we got to this one area. It was like a gully, you know. I made it to the gully, and I remember my squad leader came, Jim Baker. He was a brand new squad leader. He came and jumped right next to me, and he was firing away. And all of a sudden, he got shot. You know, he got shot in the butt. You know, and he starts screaming. He says, "Why did I get shot there? How am I going to explain this to my girl?" You know,
Yeah.
he wasn't thinking about the wound.
This isn't a hero's wound.
You know,
Call Jody.
yeah. You know. In the meantime, they're lobbing grenades at us, and we're lobbing. You know, and I remember I had 9 brand new. I had a pouch with 3 tiers, 3 in each tier, 9 brand spanking new M26 grenades that I took out of the box that they came in at the
Sure.
round container. They were brand spanking new, and every time I lobbed a grenade, it didn't go off. You know, I made positive that I pulled a pin, I will flip the spoon, and none of those grenades went off.
Gosh.
You know. And in the meantime, and I remember there was a building, like a...
The only good you were doing is if you hit one of them in the head.
And they
with
hit
it.
it, exactly. Yeah. But eventually, we were able to get enough artillery support, you know, and then I think we got some air support that has subsided. You know, the fighting really subsided. And I remember we got the casualties, and I remember bringing, you know, we dragged Monroe over to the hut where the corpsmen were working, and I remember Doc White, and I told him, I says, because at that time I realized that his arm moved a little bit. I knew he was still alive. And I brought him over, and I told Doc White, I says, he's still alive, you got to do something for him. He says, if we don't get some medevacs pretty soon, He's not going to
Not
make
gonna
it.
make, yeah.
You know, in the meantime, he's got guys that are torn to pieces in there. My very good friend Bill Coopervich, that was from Philly, you know, he and I always used to talk. He was like a big brother. That was his second tour of Vietnam, and he was from Port Richmond section of Philly, and we always used to talk about the seashore, you know, the Wildwood that we used to frequent when we were teenagers, you know, and he became like a big brother to me. He was killed, you know, and I see
Oh.
him laying there, you know, and
There's no describing, is there,
There-
Joe?
there
I mean,
isn't.
there's no words
No.
even.
and we have so many casualties. Another guy that I made friends with, Rich Andre from Massachusetts. His arm, he got hit in the arm and the hand. And I says, Andre, you know, and he looks at me, you know, the stare, and he looks at me, he says, Andre got hit. He says, Andre got hit. He is Andre, you know, but he was in shock, you know.
Oh, yes, oh,
You know
yeah.
what, I don't know, and maybe you can explain this to us. I'm not sure which is harder, to face the reality of combat or to face the reality of casualties in combat. When, you know, one of the most proud things I'm thankful for about our country is that we would really, truly leave no man behind, that we would do our best to honor our deceased. But the emotions that you felt, having, you know, and we talked about this earlier in the week, but the emotions that a guy feels when he's carrying his brother back to, you know, and he might be wounded or dead, or, you know, and that is just so, how do you reconcile that? How
You
do
can't.
yeah.
You don't. You don't. You just you cannot possibly describe it to somebody that hasn't witnessed it. You know, and I'll never forget. But anyway, you know, so we got all these casualties now. Finally, we're able to give medevacs. You know, they start coming in. The fighting has really subsided. They moved back, and after the choppers leave, about an hour later, we hear these drums. You know, they're beating drums in the jungle.
Unbelievable.
Drums. I thought it was a Tarzan movie, you know.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, I got Jimmy Reddington, which was Sammy's best friend, and I put him in my foxhole. You know, we dug foxholes for the night.
Oh, so you were gonna be staying there?
Oh, yeah.
And
we
that's
were,
another horrible feeling, by the way.
We're not going anywhere because now, you know, we're stuck there, you know, at least for the time being. So we're dig foxholes, and when they start playing those drums, Reddington looks at me, he says, "This is it, isn't it?" I says, "Don't worry, just keep digging." Then I told him, I says, you know, when it was starting to get dark, I remember we tried by this time we're running out of food, but we were able to get a chicken. There was a chicken running around. We killed the chicken.
The old farmhand comes in.
Yeah. So we kind of cut her apart and everything. We started cooking her in a helmet. And I remember Lieutenant Sam Williams, he was a 2nd Platoon commander, great guy. And he comes over, he says, "You guys got to put that fire out." You know, and so we ate what we thought was cooked. It wasn't really cooked, but, and of course I got stuck with a neck piece. But anyway, so that, yeah, we set in for the night. The drums start pounding, and it was really a weird feeling. So I told Reddington, I says, "Take all your grenades out, you know, whatever you have left, put in there. Your M79." He still had his M14, you know, because he, and he had, you know, all his magazines.
It's gonna be like a final stand.
Oh yeah, you know, and I says, you know, if and when they hit us, you know, we want to be prepared, you know, just make sure, you know. And this was the sentiment all around the perimeter, you know. Everybody thought for sure we were going to get hit. That we didn't get hit. We waited for the attack that never came. You know, the next morning we moved out, and the 23rd, and we again engaged the enemy. We were fighting again. You know, then we got word. All right, we're going to go back. So Echo Company, we're going to go back to a place called Fulak. You know, where we always kept 2 platoons, and the 3rd platoon, which I was assigned to, we were going to go to Mylock on a hill, but we had to cross the river first, you know. And so as we're going back, all of a sudden we get a hit again. You know, this time you could see the water splashing in front of you because it was raining, it was miserable, you know. So there was a stream, at least what we thought was a stream, but the enemy was on the other side. So we start charging, moving forward. You know, we're like on you would describe how Marines have a tendency to attack and just move forward on line. But that stream was no longer a stream, it was like a raging river, you know, because of all the
rain.
All the rain. And, but unbeknownst to me, one of the guys stepped on the water and the water took him under. I never knew the circumstances of that until a couple of years ago when we had our reunion up here, and Lieutenant Sam Williams, which was the 2nd Platoon commander at the time, told me, he says he was, Lieutenant Williams was the first guy to get to the water, and he wanted to test the water. He kept telling everybody to stay back. He wanted to test the water before, you know, to see if it was safe. Well, he realized that it wasn't safe. But unbeknownst to him, this kid was right behind him, you know. And when he saw Lieutenant Williams step on the water, you know, of course, he did the same thing. But Lieutenant Williams, when he turned to the left. He didn't see, you know, his guy behind him. And of course, the water took him right under, and he's carrying all that stuff, you know, and it just took him under. And of course, everybody tried to grab him, but he couldn't do it, you know. Eventually, we were able to put a rope across somehow, and we're able to cross. By that time, the enemy was gone, but we could never recover the guy. Eventually, that streamer went into the Dubon River, and a couple of days later, they found him near Da Nang.
For heaven's sake.
Floating body. And when Sam Williams told me that at the reunion, he got very emotional.
Yeah.
You know? He says, you know, he felt responsible.
Oh,
really,
sure. Oh,
you know?
sure.
But anyway, so we were eventually got back across the river. The Navy, they had these boats, they call them Mike boats, or they have a name for every type of boat. To me, it was a boat.
Running up and down the river?
Well, they would come and pick us up. We'd tell them where, and they would come and pick us up or take us down or up river. I never knew the exact names of the what type of boats. And so they took us across river.
Were they heavily armored with
yes.
a 50 and
yes,
some
they have 50 calibers.
Yeah, those were those river boats that they were running.
And so we dropped off first and second platoon at Fulak 6. It was near a place called, they eventually built a bridge there, they call it the Liberty Bridge. And our platoon, the third platoon, we went to Mylock Hill. Now, you have to understand that everything was mud. And when you step, sometimes you're knee deep in mud, and sometimes I could feel the tensions on my legs and the pain from just getting out of the mud. But we're finally reach the hill, going up the hill. We get inside the concertina wire. There were 2 teams up there, you know, to guard the hill while we were going. And when I got near the bunkers, where our bunker was, and I looked up, near the CP bunker, I see Doug Weaver, Cornflake. I used to call him Cornflake because he was from Iowa. And, you know, and I went over to him, and Lieutenant Cardell was there with him, you know. And I says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Well, I'm back." I says, "You were in Okinawa." He says, "Yeah, but I'm done, you know, I'm back, you know." And then all of a sudden the tears came down, you know, because I didn't want him to come back, you know.
And you didn't want him to come back.
I didn't want him to come back. You know, I figure, you know, he's got a son.
Little kid.
Yeah, he's got a little kid, and but anyway, but during the time that night that we were there in the foxhole, Jimmy Reddington and I started talking, and he found out that I was from Sicily. His mother was Italian, you know, and he told me that he was from Pennsylvania. He was from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I says, "Where's Scranton?" And he looks at me. He says, "You never heard of Scranton?" I says, "No, I'm from Chester." You know, he said, "Oh, we have famous people from Scranton." I says, "Yeah, who?" You know, he says, "Well, there's a movie star, Jack Palance."
Oh, yeah.
I says, "Who's Jack Palance?" Well, that really burst his bubble.
Sure.
But anyway, he and I have started becoming very good friends, you know, because the whole night we talked. Nobody slept, everybody, you know, we just talked. And but anyway, now we're back on Mylock Hill, and we're given a word that tomorrow morning, Christmas Eve, we're going to go back to the base camp, you know, at M1, and we're going to have, you know, for Christmas we'll
Turkey dinner.
We'll have a hot dinner, you know, hot meal and everything. Well, Thursday morning, we're packing our packs and, you know, getting ready to move out. We get a radio message from Lieutenant Ebert, the company commander in Full Lock. He says, "I want you guys to come down here to Full Lock. We're going to board boats, and we're going to go across the river again." Here, during the fighting, one of the choppers got shot down, and Golf Company stayed out there while the Fox and Hotel Company and Echo Company came back. They stood out there. They're out of food and almost out of ammunition. So now they tell us, you know, the double ammunition, double food, you know, so that we could bring it to those guys. Now this is Christmas Eve now. By the time we get to Full Lock, we walk to Full Lock, it's already noontime or whatever. And and by the time we leave Full Lock, when the boats came, it's pretty well in the afternoon. In the meantime, Hanoi and Washington declare a truce for Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve and Christmas, you know, as they did for Tet as well. So they figure, oh, there'll be no fighting Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And so eventually we board the boats, you know. We're moving, I always thought we were going downriver. Everybody keeps telling me we went upriver, you know. So I really don't know which way we went, but we went. The only thing I knew, we were going back to where I really didn't want to go back to. But anyway, as we're moving, and this is late afternoon now, all of a sudden, we're looking at the enemy. They're on both sides of the river, on both river banks, with their weapons, their uniforms. They're looking at us, we're looking at them, and the instructions were very explicit. No one is to fire, you know, it's a truce.
Yeah.
You know, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
That's surreal.
That is. These are the guys that I'm trying to kill, and they're trying to kill us.
Absolutely.
You know, so we went, you know, by the time we got to our destination on a river bank anyway, it's already getting dark, you know. And we got off the boats, And not long after we got off, we get hit.
Oh,
I mean, we got hit, really bad. And guys are dropping out. And all of a sudden I see like a trench, because it's now dark. I see a trench, and I dove into the trench. Lieutenant Eber, the company commander, went into that trench, and quite a few other guys. Yeah, and so we're trying to fight back. So Lieutenant Ebert gets on the radio and calls for artillery. Well, the battalion commander tells him, I can't give you artillery. He says, why not? I need artillery, He says, it's a truce. He says, and now Lieutenant Ebert is getting pissed.
oh, I can imagine.
He's screaming on the damn radio. He says, I need artillery support and I need it now. My guys are dropping, I'm getting a lot of casualties. And he says, I can't give you artillery. And all of a sudden somebody else gets on radio and says, Colonel, if you don't
That
give...
had heard that, like the
Yeah,
squawk, they were on the talk? Yeah.
They were monitored, they were on
That's
the
what
net.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, they were on a net. And all of a sudden, Lieutenant Eber hears this guy says, Colonel, if you don't give that artillery support right now, I'm going to relieve you right on the spot. Here was General Nickerson, the division commander.
Oh,
And
Hello.
all of a sudden, we got artillery support. We started getting artillery support. In the meantime, as we're getting out of the trench, Lieutenant Ebert gets it right in the chest. I watch him go down. And he gets up again, and he goes down again. And in the meantime, one shell landed right near us, not the artillery shell, but one of their mortar shell. And I just heard this whistling, exactly, sound coming, and I'm down, and this kid next to me, I didn't even know his name at the time. His name was Sewell, from Alabama. He gets it in a helmet, and but he he doesn't go down. All of a sudden, I grab him and say, "You okay?" And he's got this look on his face. He says, "Yeah, I'm okay." And there was such a dent on that helmet. It was.
I'll bet
It-
that
it
rang
did-
his bell.
Oh God, I think he was in total la la land. But the more artillery support we got, the better things were, and eventually we were able to move. Now we got to carry the dead, the wounded, and we carry Lieutenant Eber through the jungle all night. And I remember there was the way Lieutenant Williams explained the reunion. He says there was like a hut there, and there was like a bench, and they put him on top of that bench, and 4 guys were carrying him. And on occasions he would almost fall off, and guys would hold him, and we carried him all night until we reached Golf Company. Now it's pitch dark, no moon out, overcast, raining, and Golf Company, they're now worried that we're going to run into them and fire on them, and we're worried that they're not going to realize
sure.
that it's
Oh,
us.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
so Lieutenant Williams, he took over the company, and he's constantly on the radio telling Golf Company,
We're coming.
we're coming and we're coming, don't fire on us.
Yep.
And finally, matter of fact, when we got to a certain point, everybody's saying, where the hell is Golf Company? And somebody yelled, Golf, are you out there? Goofy Golf, are you out there? Just started.
Sure.
And finally we got a response, and we reached their perimeter. And, between the two companies, Golf and Echo, by this time, we couldn't even make up 3/4 of a real
Oh,
company.
my.
That's how many casualties we had. So Christmas Day, the next morning, is we're getting ready to move again. because now they're bringing these big choppers and to take the helicopter out. And the golf company commander is on the radio with a battalion commander, and he says, we're ready to evacuate now. And the battalion commander says, okay, you're going to fly out, Echo Company's going to walk out. And thank God, Captain, I forgot his name, the golf company commander, he says, with all due respect to our Colonel, either we all fly out or we all walk out. And believe me, if we had to walk out, we would have never made it back.
Oh my gosh.
And finally, Everlente, he says, I'm going to send enough choppers for everybody.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, so we made it back to Amwat on Christmas Day. And I don't remember very much of it because I was in kind of la-la land myself, because when I dove in that trench, I landed right on top of a nest of red ants, fire ants. And by morning, I was totally out of it. They thought I was having a malaria attack until the corpsman told me to take all my clothes off, and I was raw. I mean, raw from the chest.
They'd eaten you alive.
The pain was unbearable. The burning sensation was unbearable. So we made it back to Amwat. The corpsman took me to the Battalion A station, where they start putting this stuff on me to soothe the pain. I think I was sick for about 2 or 3 days, you know. And so a few days later, we went back again. New Year's Day.
The same place?
Same place.
Good. What, you
Same
know what?
place.
You're sounding like the Army a little bit now.
Yeah, well, it was. It was, I think it was the same for everybody.
God.
We kept going back, you know, and we went back. Of course, now I have lost this kid, Dana Rose. He was from California, and it was a booby trap. And we had at this time now, I'm no longer the squad leader. We got a sergeant, because the squad leader position is a sergeant.
Yeah.
And so we got a sergeant that came in as, with the rest of the replacements. So they gave him the squad. And so Dana's a point man. I'm behind him. And, you know, back with my fire team now. And, yeah, but we weren't moving fast enough. So the squad leader comes around, tells Rose to move a little faster. And I told the sergeant, I says, look, I says, he knows where we're going. You know, there's
And
a
we
lot
know
of,
they're in here.
yep, and there's a lot of booby traps
Yeah.
here, you know. But anyway, somehow he went around and tried to get in front of Rose, and he tripped a grenade, and of course got Rose right in the front.
Oh.
And he went down, and he was dead before he hit the ground, because there wasn't much blood, you know. So
Was
his heart-
was that a shake and bake? What, that sergeant, was he an instant that came in and?
well,
Did you guys have those 90-day wonders, we call them?
well, there were. That's a second lieutenant's. That's a second lieutenant's. But yeah, we had those.
What was
But-
this guy just? Because sometimes the Army guys had these cocky guys that either they were a good one or a bad one, you know. And this sounded
Well,
like a bad
I
sergeant.
think he just used bad judgment
Yeah.
Yeah,
by trying to move in an area that he wasn't familiar with.
yeah.
You know, because a lot of times you look for those things, whether it's a trip wire.
Sure.
You know, the wires are always hard to see, but sometimes they have, you know, maybe bamboo sticks at a certain point in a certain way for the villagers, so that the villagers know where the stuff is.
Did they
you
have
know.
those little Tudia signs that they put on the trail? Tudia, and that said there's a booby trap
No.
there for the kids? So that when
No.
the kids would be out there, the
Yeah.
kids would know not to go in there?
No, I never remember seeing.
Yeah, and you know,
those.
we had a lot of them where we operated, and you know what the Army did? Oh, there's the Tudia signs, let's go. No. Jeez.
Well, yeah, but that's unfortunately that really hit me because I thought that was an unnecessary
Yeah.
casualty, and
So which one?
and he
which
was
one-
ready to come home. That kid.
Short timer.
Oh,
Short
so
time.
it was Rose that got it?
Yeah, he got it, and the sergeant got it in the back and in the ass, and he was evacuated as well. But he came back, and I understand he turned out to be a really good
Yeah.
leader, But these things happen, unfortunately, and for the longest time, I resented that so much that I had told myself that I'm going to kill him,
Sure.
if he ever comes back. But 3 months later, I get hit, and he came back after that.
How did,
But
what was your action? What happened when you got wounded?
When I got hit, it was March 23rd. It was Operation Newcastle. On the 20th of March, in the middle of the night, we crossed the river, the same river, the Tubon River, on rubber rafts. Now, this is a whole company now, and it was supposed to be a battalion-size operation, but our company, Echo Company, we're going to go across first, 2 days early. And we're doing this in the middle of the night, again, pitch dark. They always pick a night where there's no moon out,
Right.
and on rubber rafts. Now, I've never been on a rubber raft, but anyway, so we got about half a dozen guys in each raft, 2 guys paddling, Now, when you get a whole company going across a river and guys paddling, you're going to make noise.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And this is a good-sized river. It's a navigable river, where they have, you could
Sure.
have boats going up and down. And I'm saying to myself, please don't let the enemy be on the other side,
Oh,
because
ducks. You'd be ducks.
thank God we made it to the other side. And just recently I found out from the 1st Platoon Commander, Lieutenant John Newton from Massachusetts, we were talking about it, and he says, I had a leaker. His boat leaked. And the more it leaked, the faster he tried to go across, and he barely made it to the other side.
Jeez.
Because you fall in a river, of course you got the current, number one, and you got
Sure.
all that equipment, you may as well kiss your ass goodbye, excuse
Yeah.
the expression, But anyway, we made it across. The next morning we moved in, and we encounter a few scatter, problems. On the 22nd, we got hit, and a good friend of mine that I went through boot camp and ITR and everything with Norris Rushing. He was from Harlem, New York, and he got hit. He got shot in the leg, and a couple other guys got hit. I think it was Bob Mundy. I think he got hit that day, and the next day, March 23rd. Now the whole battalion is across, and on the 23rd, we come to this big open area, and so the company commander, by now we got a new company commander.
Mm-hmm.
We had another one in between, between Lieutenant Eber,
Mhm.
Christmas, then Lieutenant Williams, but he was rotating back. So we got a Captain Elgard.
Okay.
He lasted 1 month. He got shot in the chest, and he was gone. And so now the 23rd, we come to this big wide open area. Now normally when you come across a big open area and there's a village on the other side and there's no movement, you're going to hit something. So Captain Blessing, which is now the new company commander, he calls the battalion commander. Now this is a new battalion commander, Lieutenant Alan Jackson, and he tells him, he says, I need artillery support before we cross. And
Which would have been a smart
a smart
thing
thing
to
to do. Colonel Jackson says, we're behind schedule, get your ass across.
Oh.
And he tells them, he says, I think we're gonna get hit. He says, I don't care, you're gonna get across. You know, so, and he says, and if you don't do it, I'm gonna relieve you.
Yeah, sure.
So he tried again he says, you're relieved. He says, put Bertolozzi on, Lieutenant
You
Bertolozzi.
relieved him right there.
He relieved him, he puts Bertolozzi on, Lieutenant Bertolozzi, and he says, you're now the company commander. He says, with all due respect, I'm not going across, I'm not gonna give my men across unless we get artillery support. So now you put Captain Blessing back
Yeah.
as the company commander. So Captain Blessing calls our platoon. Lieutenant Fuller, this is, you talk about 90-day wonder. Well, this is, Lieutenant Fuller got there right after Christmas, you know, when we got all the new replacements. Lieutenant Fuller was a great guy and a great leader, because I'll never forget when he got all the squad leaders together, and he told us, he says, look, he says, I'm the lieutenant, I'm the platoon commander, but he says, you guys have been here. You guys know what's going on. You know the area. If I'm doing something that you don't feel is right, please let me know.
Absolutely.
Let me
So
know.
he turned out to be a good one.
He was great.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Fuller was a great guy. Well, anyway, Captain Blessing calls Lieutenant Fuller on the radio, and he tells him, he says, Lieutenant, I want you to send one squad across. He says, but under no circumstances are you to go across. And he told them that over and over again. He says, one squad, they reach the other side, then you could have your other, but under no circumstances are you to go across. Well, Lieutenant Fuller, he was pretty smart, and he knew this was a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And he, as a matter of fact, Captain Blessing told him he was going to send Sergeant Webb over to take the squad across. Well, I don't know who Sergeant Webb is or was, because he never came to where we were. And I remember Lieutenant Fuller says, I'm taking the second squad across. He told me, he says, you stay inside the tree area, and, you know, we make it across, you have your guys come across. And well, when they got about halfway through, halfway to the other side, that's when all hell broke loose.
So the artillery hadn't even arrived yet.
The what?
The artillery.
Oh, no, we
I
didn't
mean,
get
we
any
haven't
artillery.
even- we haven't
No,
even-
we haven't even, he hasn't called any artillery. He wasn't gonna give us any artillery. So they got about halfway across, and they're, you know, stagger 15 meters apart, you know, I mean, true for, you know, and all of a sudden, all hell break loose. You know, you have automatic weapons, machine guns, you got mortar shells, and all of a sudden, you know, I could see those mortar shells. You could hear the swishing sound. And those guys, like, were getting murder in that open field. And I could hear the screaming of the guys that were wounded there.
With the lieutenant, you mean?
With the lieutenant. And, you know, I had no idea what was going on at the time, because, you know, I don't have a radio now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm telling my guys behind me, I says, we got to get up here and get some fire support out there to help those guys, you know, to either try and move forward or come back.
Yeah.
You know, and as I'm saying that, you know, I remember Kim Winter, that's the Korean
Yeah.
guy I show you his picture. Kim was under this one tree, and he was pretty far from where I was, and I yelled at him. I says, Kim, get your ass up here, you know. And so he came running up, and at that time, I could see the mortar shells landing, walking in right on us. But I never heard the one that landed right behind me, you know. And that thing just lifted me up, you know, it threw me, and of course it got Kim in the front that was behind me and a couple other guys, and I was knocked unconscious. You know, and when I finally came to, I could still hear the screaming, and I could still hear the gunfire and mortar shells, you know, and I'm looking, where's all my guys? You know, I don't know where Reddington is. I don't know where Doug Weaver and the rest of the guys are. You know, I saw the guys laying that were hit, you know, and just as I'm trying to move, I realized I can't move my legs from the waist down. You know, I couldn't feel anything, you know. And right about then, I get shot in the leg, you know, right, and took my calf off, and didn't feel any pain. I just felt my leg, you know, go up and down, and then, you know, I saw this kid was a brand new corpsman. You know, he was only there about a month, and he's coming, and he's trying to help the guys. He finally gets to me, and he's kind of ripping my trousers apart, and I was hit in the arm too, up here at in the wrist and here, and I had blood on my face, on my forehead, and he thought I was hit in the head.
Sure.
So he put a battle dressing around my head, and then he's trying to stop the bleeding because I had so many holes in me, and you know, and while he's doing that, he's telling me, he says, "You'll be okay, Silver." You know, they used to call me Silver. He says, "You'll be okay, Silver." And just as he said that, he got hit in the neck.
Oh,
You know, and he went down. You know, and now I'm really going in the shock, and all of a sudden he started getting up, and you could hear the voice gargling. You know, and eventually he went down, and but now I could hear the artillery coming in, you know. So he was able to get the artillery, and they and eventually were able to, you know, get rid of the enemy on the other side, and one of the other companies was able to move up. And I remember when they were moving up on me, where I was, I didn't know who these guys were. It was, you know, it could have been my company
Sure,
because I didn't
sure.
recognize anybody.
Yeah.
So it might have been a hotel company or a golf company. They were walking right over me. You know, they weren't stopping for anything. They just kept moving forward. You know, and then I found out, you know, once the other corpsmen came, and then some of the guys from my squad, and they told me Lieutenant Fuller was dead, John King was dead, Jimmy Reddington was dead, and I'm trying to, you know, and
they're telling you this while you're laying on the.
well, I'm laying there,
Man.
yeah, and that's when I went into shock. I mean, I started,
That was-
and then I started yelling. Because I could still hear some fighting, you know, some firing, and I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, you know, and I'm screaming not to take any prisoners, to kill all those,
Yeah.
you know what I'm trying to say, and finally they got me calmed down, you know, and I could not understand.
Did the corpsman give you some morphine?
Yes, they gave me morphine, but I didn't feel anything anyway. I couldn't
I mean,
feel
but
it.
was that part of when you started?
Yeah, I think that's when it
Yeah.
was. Yeah, and then I remember there was an Amtrak. They came in. I don't know where the hell the Amtrak came from. Must have been with the other company. And I remember they took some of the wounded, including myself, and put us inside the Amtrak. And I kept asking, you know, about Reddington. Where's, you know, what happened to Reddington? And they just told me that he was dead. And I didn't know until 2001, May 1st, 2001, when I went to visit Nelson up. I was actually up in New York City for work, and I hooked up with Nelson. He was in our squad, and he told me about Jimmy Reddington. And we're having lunch, and he says, you know, Jimmy got killed because of his loyalty to you.
Oh,
I says, what are you saying? He says, when Jimmy saw you get hit and you're on the ground, he thought you were dead. And he went berserk, you know, he had that M79 and he moved forward and he started screaming, you MFs, or, you know,
Yeah.
you killed my buddy, and he kept moving, and he got shot in the head, you know. And I tell you, it was like a train just hit me when he told me that. And then later on, a few years later, Joe Moss came up from Texas when we were doing a memorial service for Jimmy Reddington up in Scranton. Joe and Bob Warren and a couple other guys came up, and he told me, he says, Joe, he says, I was in the middle of that field, you know, and he was, you know, they were completely isolated out there. They couldn't move because of the amount of, you know, ammo, you know, rounds that were.
Weathering fire.
Yep. And one of Joe Morse's guys from his fire team was shot in the head. Bill Walls. He lived right across the river from Philly over here in Camden. He was shot in the head, and Joe tried to help him, and he reached behind his head to see where, you know, where the round. But when he reached, his hand literally went into his brain, you know.
Sure.
And finally, he tried to use a bottle dressing or something to try to stuff it in there to keep it from bleeding to death. But everybody thought he was dead, you know. But Bill Walls did survive. He and I were in the Naval Hospital together. And I remember one day I was on a gurney. They were taking me to an x-ray. And Bill Walls was in a wheelchair. And they were bringing him out of x-rays. And I saw him and I kept yelling, hey, Walls, it's me, Silver. You know, nothing. He was looking straight ahead.
Uh-oh.
And when he got by me, I was able to move my arm, and I grabbed the wheelchair. I said, Walls, it's me, you know. And the two corpsmen that were, you know, taking on, you know, with the wheelchair, told me, he can't hear you and he can't see you.
He's not there.
He's not there, and they gave me the impression that he wasn't going to make it.
Oh.
But he did survive. He did survive, and I have a picture here of us about 5 years ago where I hooked him up with Joe Morse, the guy that saved his life, you know. And
It's amazing.
but anyway, the bottom line is, you know, we lost a number of good guys on that day.
Mm-hmm.
And probably didn't have to happen if we had gotten artillery support to
Mhm.
begin with. But that's the stupidity of war, I guess. And yeah, and you know, I'm laying in a naval hospital over here, you know, and I hear about the guys now. They're on Operation Union 1 and Union 2. You know, where they're getting slaughtered. You know. Matter of fact, we got a presidential unit citation for it. We got a presidential unit citation for Colorado, I think, or some
Mhm.
other. You know, I had no idea about these things until a few years ago. You know, about the presidential unit citations and things. You know, but you know, it. You know, it hurts so much. You know, when I think of these guys.
Sure.
Because here I am, 72 years old now. 72 years old. You know, I lived a life. I have sons. I have grandkids. You know, I've been married more than 44 years. I just renewed our vows
Awesome.
2 weeks ago. And, you know, Jimmy was 2 weeks shy of his 20th birthday. He never got that chance. John King never got that chance. Dana Rose never got that chance. Bill Cooperovich never got that chance.
Sammy
You know,
never got that chance.
None of those guys. And when I visit the war, I still see them as 18, 19, 20
Yes,
years old.
yes.
You know? Yeah, and I look at these pictures and I say to myself, why? Why did I survive? You know?
Mhm.
But another thing also, that Christmas week, that was such a horrible week. I remember that I spent those 2 days in a Battalion A station. As soon as I got out, I wrote a letter to a friend of mine. She owned a sandwich shop over here, maybe 10 minutes from here. And that's all the kids used to hang around there, you know. And I wrote her a letter and I told her, I says, you know, we're all gonna die. We just don't know when,
Mhm.
you know. I had resigned myself to the point that that's the way it was gonna be, you know. And, but here I am, you know, 51 years later,
Joe,
52 years later.
do you ever regret serving?
No, absolutely not. No.
I was gonna ask you, what are you most proud of about your service?
Well, I served with some of the greatest guys. I served, you know, with a great outfit. The 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines is the most decorated unit of the Vietnam War for the Marine Corps. I don't know about the rest of the
Sure.
the branches of the service. You know, in all honesty, while I was there, I never knew what anybody else was doing, what other units
of course
were doing.
not, sure.
You know, I only knew what we were doing. And those leaders that I had the best leaders as far as platoon commanders and company commanders. I won't say that for the battalion commanders, you know, but you know, there's only 2 that are still alive. You know, Lieutenant Ebert, by the way, Lieutenant Ebert did survive. He refused to get out of the Marine Corps and retires a full bird.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
He retires a full bird, and then when he retired, he was moved to New Orleans because of his work, and then he became Homeland Security Director of New Orleans, and he was there during Katrina. When all the politicians left, and he was there for the duration, and he was stuck inside the Superdome, you
Mhm.
know, and it broke my heart when I saw him on TV, you know, it really broke my heart. Well, he and I are still very good friends, and when I found out that he was still alive 25 years later.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask you this, Joe. We're talking about the guys you served with. What is your definition of a hero?
Definition of a hero is somebody that gives his life, they gave their life for this country. You know, medals don't mean anything. You know, the heroes to me are the guys that I served with, because they all did a great job. We protected each other. You know, sure, there's guys that got the Medal of Honor. They got it for, believe me,
Yes.
for something extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, my platoon commander got the Navy Cross. He got the Silver Star, but he had about 2 or 3 Purple Hearts to go with it. You know, Lieutenant Ford got the Medal of Honor. He would have gotten the medal. I'm sorry, he got the Navy Cross. He should have gotten the Medal of Honor
Mhm.
because he realized that was a suicide mission. But because he disobeyed a direct order,
Yep.
you know, they gave him the Navy Cross. You know, Lieutenant Williams, great guy. He was a great commander. He always used to tell me, he says, I'm just a good old boy from northern Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were up last Memorial Day, we were up in Scranton because 51 years later, Jimmy Reddington got his medals that he earned. And he didn't win the medals, he earned the medals.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
there's a definition that people sometimes use, yeah, you won the Medal of Honor. There is no such thing as winning medals. Well, anyway, we had a celebration up there, a sort of celebration of life, where the Jimmy Reddington, since I've been going to his grave since 1994, and they have since named the ball field after him. He was an exceptional athlete. Football, he led his high school to the state championship. He was an exceptional baseball player. And, yeah, but they named the ball field after him. They have now a big plaque near his neighborhood. They have a banner with his picture on, a picture that I took. And it's the only banner, they called hometown heroes. They have it in some towns, I see them all over. But Scranton is the only one in the city of Scranton.
Awesome.
And I think we started something. I'm hoping there are other people
Sure.
for their, But, when we decided to get his medals, and of course I asked Lieutenant Eber, or Colonel Eber, and Captain Williams, because that was their rank when they got out, if they would come up. They didn't even hesitate. Sam Williams came up from Texas, and Colonel Eber from New Orleans. And of course I got a bunch of other guys that came up. But also, the one guy that found out about it is General Christmas. I don't know if you ever heard of General
Never
Christmas. General Christmas was the hero of Way City during the Tet Offensive. If you ever see on a History Channel or
Oh, I have. Way was
the
just
Battle of Way,
unbelievable.
you always see General. Well, he was Captain Christmas at that time. He was a commanding officer of Hotel 25, and he found out what we were doing, and he says, "Wait a minute," he says, "that's the same battalion I was in." He says, "I want to be there."
Oh, wow.
A 3-star general, retired now, decided to come up and be a part of this, and it was such a tribute and such an honor, an honor to have him there,
Mhm.
and between them and my commanding officers, I'll tell you, it was something. And Captain Williams, that came from northern Georgia, where, if you remember, in the 50s and 60s, of course, was segregation and
Yeah.
all that other stuff. And he gave a speech during the dinner, and he got very emotional and nearly broke down. He says, "Look what we had in Vietnam. We had people from all walks of life. We would have given our lives for each other."
Mhm.
He says, "Why couldn't we have brought that back home?" Because when
Oh,
he came,
yes.
when he came home, it was still segregation down
Sure.
there. But anyway, Sam eventually went in the FBI and retired from the FBI, and Colonel Ebert, he retired as a full bird. A great guy. I keep in touch with those guys and all the guys that survived.
I had asked you what you're most proud of. I think a lot of people, when they watch this, they'll be more proud of the fact that the keeper of the secrets opened his heart and allowed people to experience and understand,
Yeah.
and telling the stories, and then just hearing. Some guys can't,
No,
but God in His mercy, I believe, gives men the grace.
there's, for so many years, I didn't discuss
Mhm.
anything. I certainly never discussed with my family members.
Sure.
When I would wrote letters home, I would never
Everything
discuss
was
it.
great. It rained today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
never discuss anything. But and when I was working, I was a criminal investigator. I worked for the federal government. I had you know, and then of course I became the director, but I inundated myself into work,
Yes.
and sometimes I would work around the clock, especially if we had something big going, and
Mhm.
you know, just so I will not think
Sure.
about Vietnam, you know. But on occasions, I did, and of course.
Have you ever noticed though, when you're with the guys, entirely different story.
Entirely.
Joe,
You know.
I can't thank you enough.
Uh,
Listen. I asked you what the definition of a hero was.
Yeah.
After being with you,
No, don't say that. I'm not a hero. Believe me, I'm not a hero. You know, those guys whose names are on
I
the
know.
wall, they're the real
I know,
heroes.
but you know what? Some heroes actually got home, and you're one of them.
I don't consider myself a hero, but you know,
Thank you for being
it's
there.
an honor. Believe me, it's an honor
And,
to
and,
finally met you. And
and listen, don't ever forget.
I would never.
Don't
forget.
ever forget
You know,
everybody.
No, you know, and I stress that when we're at the cemetery in Scranton, which I'll be there next month again. And I always tell the people there, never ever forget.
Yes.
You know, I'm there for Jimmy Reddington, but there were 36 other guys from that
Yes.
town that were killed.
Yes.
You know, it was really an honor for me to be with you guys. And,